The colony world of Vero was once alive with laughter and voices. Children played near the fields, miners worked in the mountains, and families filled the tall housing towers. Now, the planet was silent. Buildings stood broken, fields lay empty, and the wind carried only the sound of creaking metal. Mara adjusted her helmet and stepped out of the small landing craft. She was a tall woman with steady eyes, trained as both explorer and soldier. Behind her came Torin, her closest companion, carrying a scanning device. Two more crew members followed, keeping their weapons ready as they walked down the ruined street. "This place feels wrong," Torin whispered as he looked at the hollow towers. Mara nodded. The colony had sent no messages for months. When Command received fragments of strange sound recordings, they sent Mara's team to investigate. Those recordings were faint and broken, but they carried what sounded like screams. That was why people began calling them the screams of the forgotten. The team walked carefully, their boots echoing on the cracked ground. Windows were shattered, and rust covered the doors. Inside one home, a table still stood with plates on it, as if the family who once lived there had left in the middle of dinner. Mara stopped near a comm station and motioned to Torin. He connected his scanner and pulled out data from the broken device. The screen flickered and played a faint sound. The voice was rough and filled with fear. "Help, please, they are coming." The team froze. Even though the sound was weak, it felt alive, like the voice of someone who had truly suffered. "Could it be human?" one of the crew asked. "Maybe," Torin said. "But it feels different." Mara studied the ruins with sharp eyes. Something was here before them, and it was not just human settlers. The group continued moving deeper into the colony center. The streets were wider there, and the remains of machines lay scattered across the ground. Some looked like farming tools, but others were strange, with sharp edges and designs no human engineer would make. Mara knelt by one and touched its cold surface. It was not human technology. Torin looked uneasy. "That means we were not alone here. Someone else came." At the main tower, the team entered through a cracked door. The lobby was dark, filled with fallen beams and broken screens. The air smelled stale, as if no one had breathed here for years. They moved slowly, lights from their helmets cutting through the shadows. On the second floor, they found a storage room with damaged transmitters. Many wires were ripped, and the walls were marked by burns. Mara's crew worked to power one of the units. The machine came alive for a moment and produced another recording. This time it was longer. The sound was not human. The voice was stretched and echoing, almost like a song mixed with pain. It rose and fell, carrying words no one understood. But beneath the strange tones was a cry for help, filled with fear. The team felt it in their bones. "That is no human voice," Torin said. Whoever they were in pain. Mara stood silent, listening until the recording ended. Then she said firmly, "Whoever they deserve to be remembered. We need to find out what happened." The crew moved further up the tower. On the highest floor, they reached a wide window overlooking the colony. From there they could see the empty streets, the towers, the broken machines scattered like bones. In the distance, the mountains stood silent, and the sky above was pale. "This whole place feels like a grave," one of the crew whispered. Mara clenched her jaw. She refused to see Vera as just a grave. Something had happened here, something bigger than one colony. The screams they found were proof of it. As they prepared to return to their ship, the scanner beeped again. Torin frowned and adjusted it. "I am picking up something alive," he said. "Very faint, but it is there. It is not human." The team looked at each other. Their mission had just changed. They were no longer searching only for answers but also for survivors. If someone was still alive after all this silence, then they had to be found. Mara spoke with steady voice. We follow the signal. If there is life here, we will bring it out. No one should be forgotten. The crew nodded, their fear mixed with determination. The colony might be filled with ruins and shadows, but now they had a path to follow. Somewhere in the broken heart of Vera, something waited. The silence of the ruins was not complete, and the screams of the forgotten were calling them deeper into the mystery. The signal Torin picked up led the team deeper into the ruined colony. Mara walked at the front, her eyes scanning every shadow. The silence of Vera pressed on their minds, and even the sound of their footsteps seemed too loud in the empty streets. The scanner beeped with each step, its faint signal guiding them toward the mountains near the edge of the settlement. Strange that the signal is not human, Torin said quietly. He glanced at Mara. What do you think it is? I don't know, Mara answered. But whatever it is, it survived when everything else here died. That means it is important. The path took them past collapsed buildings and burned ground. Some of the walls had marks carved into them. The lines were not random, they formed shapes that looked like tall figures with long arms and hollow eyes. The team stopped to study them. These are not human drawings, one of the crew said. Mara touched the marks with her glove. The carvings seemed like a warning, or perhaps a memory left behind. Someone wanted to be remembered, she said softly. As they moved on, the air grew colder. Soon the team reached the foot of the mountains. Caves opened into the stone like dark mouths, and the scanner's signal grew stronger. Torin pointed toward the largest opening. It is coming from there. Mara tightened her grip on her weapon. Stay sharp. We do not know what waits inside. They entered the cave, lights from their helmets bouncing off wet stone walls. The deeper they went, the more they felt a strange presence. It was not a sound or a sight, but a feeling, as if unseen eyes were following them. Finally, they reached a wide chamber. In the middle lay strange machines, broken and rusted. Around them were bones, some clearly human, but others were different. Longer, thinner, not shaped like any animal they knew. The scanner beeped fast. Torin pointed to the far corner. There, in the shadows, something moved. The crew raised their lights and weapons. At first, it looked like a figure of smoke. But as the light touched it, the shape became clearer. It was tall, with long limbs and pale skin that seemed almost transparent. Its face was narrow, its eyes dark and deep, like endless holes. The creature swayed, weak but alive. One of the crew gasped. What is that? The figure stepped forward slowly, arms raised not in attack but in surrender. Its voice came out low and broken, almost like the recordings they had found earlier. The sound was not human, yet the meaning was clear, it was asking for help. Mara lowered her weapon slightly. She studied the being with steady eyes. It is not here to fight us, she said. Look at it. It is dying. Torin moved closer, scanning the figure. Its body is weak, but the signal matches. This is what we were following. The being swayed again, then collapsed to the ground. Mara rushed forward and caught it before it hit the stone. The skin felt cold, and its breath was shallow. She looked into its hollow eyes and felt both sadness and respect. This was one of the forgotten voices. We are not leaving it here, Mara said firmly. Help me carry it back to the ship. The crew hesitated. Fear was in their faces, but Mara's voice left no room for argument. Together, they lifted the fragile being and carried it through the cave. As they moved, the being whispered in its broken tongue. Some words sounded like cries, others like songs. Even without understanding, the crew felt the sorrow in each sound. Back at the ship, they placed the being on a medical bed. Torin tried to stabilize its weak body with their limited supplies. The being's chest rose and fell with difficulty, but slowly the breath grew stronger. Mara watched closely, her mind racing. Who were these creatures? Why were their voices mixed with the screams of lost humans? Hours passed before the being opened its dark eyes again. Its gaze moved over the humans, confused yet calm. With effort, it raised one hand and touched its chest. Then it spoke a single word in broken human speech. Hollow. The crew exchanged looks. The word was simple, but it felt heavy with meaning. That is what they call themselves, Mara said quietly. The Hollow. The being tried to say more, but the words came out broken. Still, the humans understood pieces of it. The Hollow had once lived free, building cities and dreams, but an enemy had come. That enemy erased their worlds and left them wandering in despair. The humans realized that the Hollow were not invaders of Vera. They were victims, just like the colonists. Mara leaned closer. We will not let you vanish. We will remember you. The Hollow closed its eyes again, resting at last. The ship hummed softly around them, and for the first time since arriving, the silence of Vera felt less empty. There was life here, and with it, a story waiting to be uncovered. Mara looked at her crew with determination. This is bigger than we thought. The Hollow are part of what happened here. If we want the truth, we must listen to them. Torin nodded. Then we are not just explorers anymore. We are witnesses. And with that, the team prepared for the next step of their journey. The screams of the forgotten were no longer just echoes. They had a face, a name, and a chance to be heard. The Hollow rested in the ship's medical bay, breathing slowly. Its body was weak, but life still clung to it. Mara sat nearby, watching closely. She wanted answers, yet she knew pushing too hard could endanger the fragile being. Torin stood at the controls, monitoring signals while the rest of the crew kept guard outside. Hours passed before the Hollow stirred. Its hollow eyes opened, scanning the room. It seemed unsure if the humans were friends or foes. Mara leaned forward and spoke softly. You are safe. We found you in the caves. We will not harm you. The Hollow's thin lips moved, struggling to form words. Its voice was broken, a mix of deep tones and soft cries. At first the crew could not understand, but then a few words became clear. Hunters, machines, danger. Mara exchanged a quick look with Torin. It is warning us, she said. The Hollow slowly sat up, though its body trembled with weakness. It pointed toward the ruined colony outside the ship, then tapped its chest. My people, it said. Taken, lost. Torin brought up the scanner, showing an image of the colony. Who took them? Who destroyed this place? The Hollow's dark eyes filled with pain. It lifted one hand and traced a shape in the air along, sharp outline that looked like a massive ship. Collectors, it whispered. The word was heavy, as if filled with centuries of fear. The crew grew silent. None of them had heard of collectors before, but the way the Hollow spoke the name made it clear. This was no ordinary enemy. Mara kept her voice calm. What are the collectors? The Hollow closed its eyes, searching for strength. Then it spoke again, slowly, choosing words the humans could understand. Machines, endless. They come from the dark between stars. They take worlds, harvest life, leave nothing. The room felt colder as the meaning sank in. Torin shook his head. That would explain why the colony fell so quickly. No one had time to escape. The Hollow nodded weakly. Humans, now hunted too. Same as Hollow. Mara leaned closer. So the collectors are after both our people. Why? What do they want? The Hollow raised its thin hand and touched its temple. Voices. Minds. They feed on them. They erase us, so we vanish forever. The words struck deep. The screams of the forgotten suddenly made sense. They were not just cries of fear. They were the last memories of those taken by the collectors. The Hollow's breathing grew heavy, but it forced out more words. We once fought. Long ago. We built weapons. But hope died. My people scattered, hiding in shadows. Now, only few remain. Silence filled the ship. The humans could feel the weight of centuries of suffering in every word. The Hollow were not monsters or strangers. They were survivors of a war against something far greater. Mara placed her hand gently on the Hollow's arm. You are not alone anymore. If the collectors come for us, we will stand. Humanity does not give up. The Hollow looked at her with tired eyes. For the first time, there was a spark of something beyond sorrow. It was small, but it was hope. Torin spoke with determination. We must bring this warning back to command. If what it says is true, the collectors will not stop at Vera. They will move to other colonies, maybe even Earth itself. The Hollow shook its head slowly. No time. They come soon. Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared. The scanners detected movement in orbit. Multiple objects were approaching Vera. Mara rushed to the console. The display showed dark shapes emerging from the void, moving in formation. They are here, Torin said, his voice tense. The collectors. The Hollow's body shook, its voice rising in fear. Run, hide, they bring death. But Mara stood firm. She looked at her crew with steady eyes. We cannot run without a plan. If we leave, we carry nothing but fear. We must learn what we can while we still have the chance. Torin frowned. You mean fight them? With this small ship? Not fight, Mara said. Survive. Observe. Find their weakness. Humanity needs knowledge if we are going to stand against them. The Hollow watched her, surprised. It whispered softly, almost to itself. Humans, still have fire. Outside, the dark shapes grew closer, their outlines sharp and cold. The colony of Vera, once silent and forgotten, was about to become the first battlefield between humanity and the machines. Mara placed a hand on her weapon and took a deep breath. If these collectors think we will vanish quietly, they will soon learn who humans are. The Hollow closed its eyes and whispered one final warning. If you fight, you must not fail. If you fall, all will be forgotten. The weight of those words filled the crew with both fear and determination. They knew the enemy was vast, but the fire in their hearts burned stronger than their fear. Humanity had been warned, and now, standing at the edge of ruin, they prepared to answer. The collectors did not land on Vera that night. Their ships drifted in orbit like shadows, silent and patient. Mara's small crew used the cover of darkness to slip away, carrying the Hollow survivor with them. Their ship sped through hidden paths in space until they reached the nearest human command station. The station orbited a gas giant, glowing faintly in the black sky. Human ships guarded it, but compared to the dark forms Mara had seen above Vera, these vessels looked small and fragile. As their craft docked, Mara prepared herself. She knew the warning they carried would shake the hearts of those in command. In the council chamber, human officers gathered around a wide table of glass screens. Generals, scientists, and colony leaders filled the room. Mara stood tall before them, with Torin at her side and the Hollow resting weakly in a sealed medical pod nearby. She began with steady voice. Vera did not fall to chance. It was not disease, not rebellion, not natural disaster. It was taken by an enemy called the Collectors. Her words stirred whispers across the room. The officers demanded proof. Mara gestured toward the Hollow. The being raised its pale hand slowly, its hollow eyes staring at the council. In broken human speech, it said, "Machines, endless, they erase." The chamber fell silent. The Hollow's voice carried a weight that needed no further explanation. Some leaders leaned forward, fear clear in their eyes. If this is true, one said, then we cannot hope to stand. Our fleets are too small. Our colonies are too scattered. Another voice rose with anger. We should pull back. Abandon outer colonies, retreat to Earth, build defenses there. Others argued in protest. If we run, we will lose every colony, every family that trusted us to protect them. The debate grew heated. Some wanted retreat, some demanded isolation, while others simply wanted to ignore the warning, hoping the collectors would pass them by. Mara raised her voice above the noise. Listen to yourselves. You speak as if humanity has no choice but fear. But fear is what destroyed the Hollow. They hid, they scattered, and they lost their hope. Do you want us to follow the same path? The chamber quieted again. Mara stepped closer to the table, her eyes strong and clear. Humans have always been few compared to the universe. Yet we built ships to cross the stars. We tamed new worlds. We stood against dangers before. If the collectors want us to vanish, then we must show them we will never kneel. We fight not only for ourselves but for every voice that would be silenced. Torin added his words. The Hollow gave up once. But they see in us something they lost long ago. If we turn away now, their screams and ours will join together in the dark. But if we resist, we can give them hope again. We can give ourselves a future. The Hollow, still weak, lifted its hand and whispered, together, strong. The simple words struck deep. The council members looked at one another. For the first time, silence carried not fear but thought. Slowly, the voices of agreement began to rise. We must unite our fleets. We must call every colony to prepare. We cannot fight divided. The decision spread like fire through the chamber. Humanity would not retreat. Humanity would not vanish. They would stand. Work began at once. Engineers studied the Hollow's broken machines, pulling secrets from their lost designs. Soldiers trained side by side with volunteers from distant colonies. Small ships were refitted with stronger weapons, and old engines were pushed beyond their limits. Humanity's scattered strength began to shape itself into something new. Mara and Torin worked without rest. They traveled from station to station, carrying the Hollow with them, showing every colony that the threat was real and that courage was still possible. Wherever they went, people listened. Farmers left their fields to join defense lines. Miners dug not for wealth but for materials to build armor and weapons. For the first time, colonies that often fought each other for resources now stood side by side. One night, Mara stood on a balcony overlooking a busy dockyard. Hundreds of workers moved below, welding, carrying, shouting orders. Ships rose slowly from their bays, like birds preparing to take flight. Torin came to stand beside her. Do you think it will be enough? He asked. Mara did not look away from the sight. I do not know. But I know this. If we do nothing, we are already lost. If we fight, we at least give the future a chance. Behind them, the Hollow approached slowly, leaning on a support rail. It looked at the rising ships with tired eyes but then spoke in a clear voice. Humans burn bright. Perhaps bright enough to light the dark. Mara placed a hand on its shoulder. We will not let your people's screams fade into silence. Nor ours. Not while we can still fight. In the days that followed, messages spread across the stars. Colonies answered the call. Fleets began to gather. Humanity had made its choice. They would not hide. They would not vanish. They would stand. The human fleet gathered at Vera, the ruined colony where the screams of the forgotten had first been heard. Dozens of ships floated above the planet, some large and strong, others small and hastily repaired. Their engines glowed faintly in the dark, forming a fragile shield around the wounded world. On the surface, Mara stood among defense lines built from broken colony machines. Gun turrets were set up between fallen towers, and soldiers crouched behind makeshift barriers. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Even the wind seemed to wait for the battle to come. Torin commanded a small strike ship in orbit, fast and sharp like an arrow. He looked at the fleet spread across the stars and felt both pride and worry. Humanity had come together, but their numbers were still few compared to what the Hollow had described. He thought of Mara on the surface and tightened his grip on the controls. The Hollow survivor, Siren as Mara now called her, stood beside the human soldiers. She wore simple armor built by engineers to fit her long frame. Though weak, her eyes burned with a spark that had not been there when Mara first found her. The sight of humans preparing to fight had given her strength. The silence of space ended when the collectors arrived. At first, they looked like shadows moving across the black. Then their forms grew clear, giant machines shaped like blades and claws, gliding without sound. Their ships had no lights, no colors, only cold metal. They came in waves, surrounding Vero like hunters closing in on prey. Enemy fleet detected, Torin's officer said. Mara's voice came through the COMM. Hold steady. Remember why we are here. This is for Vera. This is for every voice they tried to erase. The first clash began with a storm of light. Human ships fired their cannons, streaks of fire racing across the void. The collectors answered with beams of cold energy that cut through metal as if it were paper. One human ship exploded in a burst of flame, its fragments scattering across the stars. Torin's strike ship dived through the chaos, weaving between enemy fire. He targeted the smaller collector crafts, sending missiles that broke them apart. We can hurt them, he shouted into the COMM. They are not invincible. On the surface, Mara directed ground defenses. Collector drones rained down from the sky, their wings sharp and their eyes glowing red. Soldiers fired at them, filling the air with thunder. The drones moved with unnatural speed, striking from above, but the humans fought back with everything they had. Siren stood among the soldiers, her voice rising in strange tones. The sound carried power, confusing the drones for brief moments. Her people had once used song to guide machines, and now that gift became a weapon. When the drones froze, human guns tore them apart. Still, the battle was brutal. Every victory cost lives. Mara watched as soldiers fell beside her, but she forced her voice to remain steady. Hold the line. For every one of us they take, we will destroy 10 of them. Above, Torin's ship was struck by a beam. The controls shook, alarms blaring. Smoke filled the cabin. Damage to engines, his officer shouted. Keep us flying, Torin ordered. He steered the ship straight into the heart of the collector formation. If humanity was to stand, they had to show no fear. He locked onto the largest enemy craft and fired all weapons. Explosions burst across the dark hull. For the first time, a collector ship shuddered and fell silent. The comm channels filled with cheers. They can be beaten, a pilot cried. But victory was still far. More collector ships arrived, endless and cold. The humans fought bravely, but for each enemy they destroyed, 2 more appeared. The fleet was breaking apart. On the ground, Mara realized the truth. They could not win this battle fully, not yet. But they could prove something greater. They could show the collectors that humanity would never bow. She raised her weapon high and shouted so all her soldiers could hear. If they want to erase us, let them try. We will fight until the stars themselves burn out. The humans roared with her, their voices carrying across the ruined colony. The Hollow beside them lifted her head, and for the first time in centuries, her people's sorrow turned into courage. As the battle raged, the collectors began to pull back slightly. They had expected an easy harvest, a world falling silent without resistance. Instead, they had found humans who fought like fire itself. Torin's voice came through the comm, rough but strong. Mara, they are retreating for now. We pushed them back. Mara lowered her weapon, her chest heavy with exhaustion. Around her lay broken machines, fallen soldiers, and burning ruins. Yet she smiled faintly. The humans had stood, and the Hollow had stood with them. The first clash was not a full victory, but it was enough. The collectors had learned that humanity was not prey. They were defenders, and they would not vanish quietly. Mara looked at Siren, who stood tall despite her wounds. "This is only the beginning," she said. Siren nodded. "Yes. But now, hope lives again." The battlefield above Vero was quiet at last. The collectors had retreated into the dark, leaving behind broken ships and scattered wreckage. Human vessels floated wounded but alive, smoke drifting from their hulls. On the surface, soldiers tended to the fallen, patching wounds and repairing defenses. Mara walked among them, her armor covered with dust. She carried both pride and sorrow. Many had died, but humanity had shown strength. They had proven to the collectors that they would not be erased easily. Siren, the Hollow survivor, stood beside her. Her pale face was lined with exhaustion, but her hollow eyes burned with something new. "You fight as fire," she said softly. "That is why they pulled back. They do not understand fire." Torin's ship landed soon after. He stepped out with a limp, his uniform scorched, but his spirit unbroken. Mara helped him down the ramp. "You should rest," she said. He shook his head. "No time. They will come again, stronger than before. We need more than courage. We need a way to break them." That night, in a makeshift command tent, the leaders of the fleet gathered. Maps of space glowed on the table, showing the spread of human colonies and the path of the collectors. Every officer knew the truth: bravery alone could not stop machines that had erased entire civilizations. It was then that Siren spoke. Her voice was weak, yet every ear turned toward her. "Long ago, my people built something. A device. It was never finished. It was meant to strike at the minds of the collectors, to turn their own control against them. But we lost hope. We never completed it." Mara leaned forward. "Where is it?" Siren closed her eyes, remembering. "Hidden. Buried in the ruins of our last stronghold. Few of my people even know it exists. But with your fire and our memory, it could be made whole." For a moment, silence filled the tent. Then Torin slammed his hand on the table. "That is it. That is the key. If we can finish this weapon, we may finally turn the tide." The council agreed. A mission was planned at once. Mara, Torin, Siren, and a small team would travel to the Hollow ruins to recover the device. The journey took them across silent sectors of space, through broken systems where Hollow cities once shone. When they reached the stronghold, their eyes widened. The world was a graveyard of glass and stone, towers melted by the fire of machines. Yet beneath the ruins lay vast chambers, untouched for centuries. Inside, they found the remains of Hollow engineers, their tools frozen in place as if they had fallen while still at work. At the center stood a massive machine, dark and silent, covered in dust. Its design was alien yet strangely elegant, with spirals of metal and lines of crystal that glowed faintly when touched. Siren approached it with trembling hands. "This was our last hope. We called it the Heartbreaker. It was meant to shatter the link that binds the collectors." Mara placed her hand on the cold metal. "Then we will finish what you began." For days they worked, combining human engineering with Hollow memory. Human tools restored broken parts, while Siren guided them through the alien design. Torin crawled through narrow shafts, connecting circuits and reprogramming systems. Mara oversaw every step, her determination never fading. At times, it seemed impossible. The machine resisted, its ancient parts refusing to awaken. Torin grew weary, his hands cut and burned, but he pressed on. Siren sang in her strange tones, coaxing the crystals to glow once more. Slowly, the heartbreaker began to live. Finally, the last piece was set in place. Lights spread across the machine like veins carrying fire. A low hum filled the chamber. The device was awake. But there was no time to celebrate. Scanners lit up with warnings. Collector ships had followed them, drawn by the sudden burst of energy. Dozens of enemy vessels descended toward the ruins. "They know what we are building," Torin said. "They cannot let this survive." Mara's eyes hardened. "Then we protect it with everything we have." The humans rushed to their ships, dragging the heartbreaker onto a transport. As they lifted into the sky, the collectors struck. Beams of cold energy tore across the air, shaking the transport violently. Torin's strike ship soared beside it, drawing fire. "Go, Mara. Get that device to safety. I will hold them back." "No," Mara shouted over the comm, "we stay together." But Torin smiled through the smoke of his cabin. "If we do not take this chance, humanity will never win. Let me do this." He dived straight into the collector fleet, weaving through their fire. His ship was small, but his courage was vast. He aimed for the largest enemy vessel, carrying the Heartbreaker's activation codes. With one final strike, he slammed through their defenses and delivered the signal. The Heartbreaker awoke fully. A wave of invisible power spread across the battlefield. Collector ships froze in place, their glowing eyes flickering. Some turned against each other, firing blindly, tearing themselves apart. Others went silent, drifting lifeless into the void. The human fleet cheered, their voices rising over the comm. For the first time, the collectors were broken. But when the smoke cleared, Torin's ship was gone. Mara searched the stars, her heart heavy, but no signal came back. Siren placed a hand on her shoulder. "He gave fire to the dark. His light will not fade." Mara clenched her fists. The collectors had been wounded, but they were not finished. Humanity had gained a weapon, but at the cost of a hero. The war was far from over, yet for the first time, there was a turning point. Mara lifted her head, her eyes burning with the same fire Torin had carried. "We will not stop here. This is only the beginning of their fall." The wreckage of the last battle still floated above Vera. Human ships moved slowly through the ruins, pulling survivors, counting the cost, and carrying the wounded back to safety. For the first time since the war had begun, silence followed victory. Yet the silence was not peace, only a pause before the storm returned. Mara stood at the edge of the command deck, her gaze fixed on the stars. She thought of Torin, whose ship had not returned. His sacrifice had given them the Heartbreaker, the weapon that had shattered the collector fleet. But she knew the machines would not remain broken forever. They would learn. They would adapt. Humanity had only gained time, not freedom. Siren entered the deck, her pale steps light but steady. She no longer looked only like a shadow of the hollow. She carried herself with strength, as if Torin's fire had kindled something inside her. She stopped beside Mara. "Your friend gave more than his life," Siren said quietly. "He gave the spark of hope. That spark is spreading." Mara nodded. "We must not waste it." Word of the Heartbreaker spread quickly through human colonies. For the first time in many years, colonies that had been divided stood together. Ships once scattered across the stars began to rally. Engineers worked night and day to rebuild the Heartbreaker into stronger forms. Scientists studied the fragments of disabled collectors, searching for weaknesses. Farmers, miners, and children gave what little they could to support the soldiers. Humanity had been cornered, but now it had teeth. The hollow ruins also came alive again. With Siren's guidance, humans began to restore what was left of her people's cities. Hollow knowledge blended with human skill, creating tools and weapons no race had ever built before. The ruins no longer felt like graves. They became a workshop of survival. Mara spent her days between fleets and ruins, carrying orders, encouraging soldiers, and watching the Heartbreaker grow into something greater. But every night, when the stars filled the sky, she thought of Torin. His voice still echoed in her memory. She carried his fire within her, using it to push back her own grief. One evening, while the fleet prepared for another assault, Siren brought Mara to a quiet chamber beneath the hollow ruins. At the center stood a crystal tablet, glowing faintly with ancient words. "This was written by my people when the collectors first came," Siren explained. "It tells of those who would carry the burden of resistance. We believed it would be us, but we failed. Now it is you." Mara touched the tablet. The crystal glowed brighter, as if answering her touch. She looked at Siren. "Then we carry it together. Humanity and Hollow. The forgotten will no longer scream in silence. Their voices will rise through us." Siren lowered her head in respect. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile, though faintly. The next battle came quickly. The collectors returned, larger in number, trying to erase the spark before it could spread further. Human ships rose to meet them, their formations tighter, their weapons sharper. At the center of the fleet was the Heartbreaker, now rebuilt and pulsing like a living star. The collectors unleashed their swarm, but the Heartbreaker sang through the void. Waves of power rippled outward, confusing enemy signals, breaking their unity. Ships that once moved as one now staggered, some turning against their own. Humanity pressed the attack, striking hard where the machines faltered. Mara's ship led the charge. With Siren at her side, she directed the fleet like a blade cutting through the storm. Human pilots shouted with courage, their voices filling the comm channels. They were no longer prey. They were fighters. The battle raged for hours, but at last the collectors broke again. Many of their ships drifted dead, others fled into the dark. Humanity had not destroyed them, but for the second time they had forced the machines to retreat. When the battle ended, cheers erupted across the fleet. Mara stood tall on her deck, but her heart remained steady. She knew the war was far from over. Yet something had changed forever. Humanity had risen from fear into defiance. Later, as the fleet repaired and the stars grew quiet once more, Mara walked alone into the ruins of the hollow stronghold. She stopped at a high balcony, where broken towers reached toward the sky. Siren joined her silently. "Do you think Torin would have been proud?" Mara asked at last. Siren looked at her with calm eyes. "Pride is too small a word. He believed in a fire that would never end. That fire burns now in every soldier, every child, every world that refuses to bow. He gave humanity its legacy." Mara placed her hand over her chest. She felt the fire there, alive and growing. She turned her eyes to the horizon of stars, where the collectors still waited. "We will fight until the forgotten are no longer forgotten," she said. "We will fight until even the collectors remember the strength of humankind." The stars stretched endless before them, filled with both danger and hope. The war was not finished, but the legacy was clear. Humanity had stood at the edge of silence, and instead of falling, they had screamed. That scream had become fire, and that fire would spread until the darkness itself trembled.